thanking the courageous men and women who have joined us today for the vital work that they do, for sharing their stories with us and being so open and direct with us about the challenges that face so many families here in the GTA and other neighborhoods across Canada. Throughout this campaign, we have laid out a clear plan to put more money in the pockets of Canadian families so you can get ahead. At the same time, however, we must always remember that too many of our neighbors, too many Canadians, are facing even more serious challenges than being able to pay the bills. Aujourd'hui au Canada,
Today in Canada, there are families that are afraid to let their kids play outside because of violence in the streets. Canadians are concerned about the presence of gangs in their neighborhoods, and they're afraid that their children will become members of gangs and use drugs and violence.
Today in Canada, there are families worried about letting their children play outside or walk to school for fear of gun violence. There are Canadians who are worried about the gang presence in their neighborhoods and whether their kids will fall into the vicious cycle of gang, gun, and drug violence. They're worried about the plague of opioid and methamphetamine addiction that's costing lives and tearing apart families and communities. And worried about the vile practice of human trafficking and the innocent young lives it puts at risk. Every single Canadian deserves to grow up and live in neighborhoods free of violence and crime. And they expect their federal government to pass and enforce strong laws that keep them safe. And on this, Justin Trudeau has failed. Instead of going after gangsters and criminals who use guns to commit violent crime, Trudeau actually reduced the penalty for gang crime to as little as a fine. Instead of passing the buck off to other levels of government, it's time that Justin Trudeau showed some accountability for his own record. It is beyond dispute that the gang criminal who is prepared to shoot a gun illegally is also prepared to own a gun illegally. But don't just take my word for it. Toronto Police Chief Mark Saunders has said, quote, "In recent years, we have seen that 80% of firearms are coming in from the border." And also, quote, "By and large, shootings have street gang connotations to them or are street gang related." It couldn't be more clear. To tackle gun crime, you have to tackle gangs. Justin Trudeau's plan, forcing firearms owners who already follow the law to follow more laws, will do nothing. We have to target the source, and that's what my plan is all about. First, we will eliminate automatic bail for gang members. We'll also create a process to automatically revoke parole for convicted criminals who associate with gangs after they have been released from prison. Every week, the justice system releases violent gang criminals onto the street. The police know these gang members are violent. The Crown attorneys know they are violent. But the bail system releases them anyway. Under a Conservative government, we will stop the revolving door once and for all. We will also create new sentences for violent gang crime. Anyone who commits a violent gang crime will spend at least 5 years behind bars, and we will vigorously defend these sentences against legal challenges. Currently, with each gang-related trial, prosecutors must prove time and time again that the gang is a criminal entity. Now, our police forces already know the factions and gangs that terrorize our neighborhoods. So a Conservative government will formally identify gangs in the criminal code in a manner similar to what we currently do for terrorist organizations. This will help reduce court delays, end the waste of prosecutorial resources, and ensure fewer gang members get released on a technicality. Now, at the same time, we'll pursue smart gun control measures to keep illegal firearms off the street. It will start with strengthening background checks so that they work as intended. Under our plan, we will ensure that the RCMP is contacting references for those who apply for a gun license. It will also include cracking down on smuggled firearms. We will create a Canada Border Services Agency task force that will work with local law enforcement on both sides of the border to disrupt smuggling routes and intercept smuggled guns as they enter Canada. And we will amend the criminal code to make possession of a smuggled firearms a crime that will carry a mandatory 5-year prison sentence.
Justin Trudeau's plan, which forces gun owners who are already law-abiding citizens to abide by even more laws, won't do anything. We have to go right to the source of the problem, and that is my plan. First of all, we will eliminate automatic bail for gang members. We will also create a process to automatically revoke parole for convicted gang members once they get out of prison. A conservative government will put an end to the revolving door once and for all. We will establish new, more severe sentences for violent gang crimes, and will provide that when convicted, they will spend 5 years behind bars. Currently, for every gang-related trial, the Crown attorneys must prove that the gang involved is a criminal entity. Our police forces are already familiar with the gangs who are active on our streets. We will also take steps to prevent illegal guns from circulating on our streets. We will begin by strengthening background checks. And under our plan, we will ensure that the RCMP contacts references who are requesting a permit. We will also modify the criminal code to make the possession of a smuggled firearm subject to a 5-year mandatory sentence.
Firearms are kept out of the hands of dangerous individuals. Anyone who knowingly provides a firearm to an individual who has been banned from owning one will face up to 14 years in prison. We will back up these measures with new investments that give our police forces the tools they need to keep our communities safe. This will include a dedicated $60 million fund to help provinces and territories make investments to fight gangs, along with an additional $12 million for gang diversion and prevention programs that keep kids from falling into the cycle of violence. We will also create a police infrastructure grant program to allow municipal police forces to purchase new and innovative equipment to combat crime. And we will create a national framework that allows for better information sharing between individual police services on gang and gun crime from coast to coast. Our plan will also tackle the opioid crisis in our communities. Unlike the Liberals, we don't believe legalizing dangerous drugs is the way to keep Canadians safe. The only way to truly win this battle is to give more people a pathway out of addiction and into recovery. We will invest more in building or upgrading recovery community centers, recovery high schools, and treatment centers. This will give those who suffer from addiction, their families, and those who have recovered spaces where they can get the help and the support they need. We will also revise Canada's drug and substance strategy to focus on recovery, and we will recommit to a national education program that will inform our children, youth, and teens about the dangers of drug use. And to protect innocent children and families, we will help municipalities clean up and dispose of used needles on public property. Finally, a Conservative government will implement the harsher penalties for those engaged in the despicable practice of human trafficking, targeting the most vulnerable, the vast majority of whom are young women and girls. For sale into slavery is disgusting, obscene, and unacceptable. That is why we will amend the criminal code to remove the need for prosecutors to demonstrate that a trafficker exercised coercion or an element of fear over the victim. Many human traffickers operate much more subtly. And we will end automatic bail for all human traffickers, and if convicted, they will receive consecutive sentences for each of their victims.
We will create a national education program to inform our young people and teenagers about the dangers of drugs. A Conservative government will also bring in harsher penalties for those who engage in human trafficking, targeting the most vulnerable, most of whom are young women. To sell them into slavery is disgusting, obscene, and unacceptable. That is why we will change the criminal code to remove the need for Crown prosecutors to demonstrate that the trafficker exercised coercion or fear. And we will also put an end to automatic bail for all human traffickers, and if they are convicted, we will ensure that they receive consecutive sentences for each of their victims.
On October 21st, the people of Canada have a serious decision to make about crime. You can choose Justin Trudeau, who has made sentences softer and laws weaker for gang criminals, and whose only plan to fight gun violence is to somehow make criminals start obeying the law. Or you can choose a conservative government that will do the hard work of going after criminals, that will impose new and tougher sentences for gang crime, that will stop guns at the border, and that will take real actions to keep our neighborhoods safe so you can get ahead. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Happy to take your questions.
Glenn McGregor, CTV News. Mr. Scheer, on citizenship issue, could you explain clearly how many times you filed tax returns to the United States and exactly how much taxes you paid in the U.S.?
Well, as I said, it's not a big deal for Canadians to have dual citizenship. There are millions of Canadians who have had a parent born in one country or another, and I've always been tax compliant. I've always followed those laws.
But respectfully, you didn't address my question. I think you want to be clear and open about this, correct? So why don't you just say, how many times did you file a tax return to the U.S., and in total, how much taxes did you pay to the U.S.?
Well, as you know, in Canada, in the U.S., we have a tax treaty, so I've only ever earned income in Canada. So I filed those taxes, and I've always earned income in Canada. My salary's been publicly available on the House of Commons website.
Yes, I've always been clear on that. I only earned income in Canada, and that is publicly available on the parliamentary website. Radio-Canada. There's a CBC investigation that is revealing what happened in 2017 during Jason Kenney's leadership race, and your candidate is being accused of manipulating the vote in favor of Kenney so he could win. Do you still trust him, knowing that he could have been involved in this type of vote manipulation scheme? Mr. Appel already addressed that situation, and I'm looking forward to working with him.
So Mr. Appel has addressed this situation, and I look forward to working with Tim Appel as part of the Conservative team.
Now, in this election, authenticity and honesty are going to be central. Now, how can you look Canadians in the eye and say, trust me? You didn't tell us you were a dual citizen. You hid other things. How can you look Canadians in the eye and say, trust me? No, not at all. Everyone who's familiar with my family knows that my father was born in the U.S., unlike Justin Trudeau, who promised things in 2015, which he broke. He looked Canadians straight in the eye during the SNC-Lavalin affair, and he lied. And now he's saying things during this campaign that he has no intention of doing. So in terms of trust, Canadians cannot trust Justin Trudeau.
Hi, Mr. Scheer, Janice Dixon, The Globe and Mail. I have a question about innovation. Leaders of Canadian scale-up technology companies are concerned that parties don't have specific plans to help them grow. What are your plans to improve access of domestic companies to capital, to talent, both in markets here and also abroad, so they can grow into companies like Shopify, for example?
Well, that is a great question, and I've met with many representatives of the high-tech industry and companies, startup companies, and people who are responsible for incubators and facilitating Canadian companies to grow, to start, and to scale up. And they're often very frustrated that Justin Trudeau seems to be focused on the big, giant international companies while ignoring the great stories that we have here at home. And so our innovation agenda will absolutely help foster startups and scale-ups here in Canada. One of the ways that we will do that, of course, is by tackling the regulatory burden. I made an announcement a few weeks ago where I said there are so many regulations in Canada that prevent companies from starting and growing. and other countries have a more competitive environment for business startups, and we'll have more to say that. Of course, in our real plan for the environment, a huge piece of that is innovation, supporting research and technology development with the green patent tax credit as well. So I'm very confident that under a Conservative government, we're going to see a great deal of economic activity in startups, in high-tech, and innovative research.
Okay, and there's a video circulating of one of your candidates right now online from Burnaby, North Seymour. It shows her saying that homosexuals recruit children. Were you aware of this, and will you stand by this candidate?
I haven't seen this particular video that you're referencing. Of course, our party stands for inclusiveness and the rights of all Canadians, including LGBT Canadians, and will always do so.
Good morning, Mr. Scheer. Giuseppe Valiante, the Canadian Press. Just a couple of days ago, you mentioned that the cuts to your foreign policy and your foreign policy wouldn't affect the commitments that the Liberals had made to maternal health, reproductive rights around the world. One of your spokespeople just said recently that the Conservatives would not get involved in an ongoing UN argument over abortion, how that fits into international health. So my question is, do you think the Canadian government has the responsibility to defend the right of women and girls to access the full spectrum of sexual and reproductive health services around the world?
I think it's very important for Canadians to understand that the laws on this issue will not change under a Conservative government. Access will not change. This is a debate that divides Canadians. That's why we will not reopen it. That's why access won't change here at home. And we're certainly not going to have a divisive debate at the international level as well.
Canadians can be confident that the laws will not change under a Conservative government. They had access under a Liberal government. They had access under the previous Conservative government, and they will have access in future. We will have our debates here in Canada and not internationally.
On the announcement of today on gangs and guns, one of the points that you had mentioned in your policy is to revise the Canadian drug and substance strategy. And I know that you spoke about in the bullet points investing in treatment centers, recovery centers, and that kind of thing. But you didn't mention safe injection sites and the current laws around that. Would a Conservative government change anything regarding the current Canadian laws on safe injection sites?
So I have had this question before, so thank you for giving me the opportunity to be very clear and to repeat it. A Conservative government will respect the decisions of the court. We will always do that. We will also, however, recognize that community voices need to be heard in these decisions. And we do not believe it's fair to moms and dads who are worried about their kids walking to school or playing in a playground, that these sites are put in without any type of consultation or without adequate levels of consultation. And that is something that we will ensure happens. At the same time, the focus should not be on maintaining addiction. We don't do addicts any favors if we just continually make it easier, or if the focus is on just maintaining a life of addiction. Our preferred route is to start to build up capacity for recovery. That's where our focus will be, enhancing the ability for health systems and for different levels of government, to different government agencies, to get people off of a life of addiction so they can have a full life.
So under your government, these centers could be closed down or moved depending on the community.
As I said, our focus will be on making sure that community consultation is done properly, and that it's robust, and that the views of the local inhabitants of an area are taken into account.
Our priority will be to ensure that the concerns and feedback from mayors and from people living in the affected neighborhoods are heard and addressed.
Salima Shif, GCBC. You say you didn't hide your dual citizenship, a U.S. and Canadian citizenship, but it was brought up numerous times by your party. So I'd like to know when you told your party that you hold dual U.S. Canadian citizenship and were following the rules and filing U.S. tax returns as well as Canadian ones.
Well, as I said, everyone who knows me or knows my family knows that my father was born in the United States, and that's been open with that, and so that's that.
So you didn't officially disclose it to your party. I'm just wondering, because the issue came up because your party was attacking other political figures for it. So
I wasn't leading the party at that time, and
you were involved in those discussions and attacks for other people. So I just wonder how you square that.
It's not a big deal in Canada for people to have dual citizenship. There are millions of Canadians who've had one or another parent born in another country. And as I said, I decided to, after I won the leadership, that I would I would renounce my citizenship, and so I have had meetings with the representatives from the embassy to tell them that I was renouncing my citizenship, and have submitted the paperwork.
So just to clarify, it didn't come up when your party was, talking about other political figures and criticizing other political figures for having dual citizenship. It didn't come up, and you didn't think, oh, maybe I should say I'm also a dual citizen?
Well, as I said, I wasn't leading the party at that time, and I've always, it's not a big deal to have dual citizenship here in Canada.
Okay. And on another topic, there's a strike looming on Monday here in Ontario. You're obviously spending a lot of time in Ontario this week, in these last few days. What does that strike do to your chances here in this province?
I think people in Ontario understand that there have been strikes at the education level against every political party who have been in office. Obviously, we hope, as we do with all labor disputes, that both sides can come to an agreement.
Yes, it's clear that in Ontario there are strikes that occur under governments of any political stripe. So we hope that there will be a solution found on both sides.
Good morning, Mr. Scheer. Ed Tubb, Toronto Star. A couple more points on citizenship. Since you held American citizenship, can you confirm what your office has already said, that you never voted in an American election? And can you please also say whether or not you've ever been a member of the National Rifle Association, as I believe your father was?
That is incorrect. I've never voted, and no one in my family has ever been a member of that organization.
Okay, thank you.
I never voted in the U.S., and no member of my family has ever been a member of that organization.
One last thing. Did you disclose your dual citizenship when you became a member of the Privy Council in 2017?
I have always followed all the rules and regulations around being a member of Parliament and holding different offices within that Parliament.
So that's a yes.
Well, as I said, it's not something that's ever been required. It's not something that's I've ever failed to be open and transparent about. Everyone who knows my family knows that my father was born in the United States. It's quite simple. Mm-hmm.
Good morning, Steve Scheer with Reuters. I wanted to ask about this Monday's the only English debate, and after the difficult debate this week, I wanted to ask you how important you think your performance will be on Monday, and what is it that you want to communicate exactly on Monday night?
Mm-hmm. Well, debates are always important. They give Canadians an opportunity to see party leaders hold each other to account. It's regrettable that there's only one English language debate. It's too bad that Justin Trudeau ducked out of the foreign affairs debate that was planned. It's understandable, given his terrible record on foreign affairs and the way that he's represented Canada around the world. It's too bad he skipped the Maclean's debate that was held early in this campaign that gave voters an early opportunity to see what the party leaders were talking about. So I'm looking forward to Justin Trudeau being there, finally, for an English language debate. And obviously I'm going to hold, not only will I hold him to account for his broken promises, but I'm also going to use it as an opportunity to promote our plans to leave more money in the pockets of Canadians, to talk about our tax cuts, the way that we're boosting the RESP, the way that we are going to raise the seniors' age credit, the way that we're going to help fight climate change on a global context, while at the same time putting more money in the pockets of Canadians with the green home renovation tax credit. So I'm very excited for Monday's debate.
Yes, I'm looking forward to finally being able to debate Justin Trudeau. He skipped out of the first two debates. He avoided the debate on foreign affairs, which I can understand, because of his horrible record on international affairs. And Monday will give me an opportunity to explain and propose my solutions to leave more money in the pockets of Canadians and make life more affordable so they can get ahead.
If I could ask about today's announcement. You know, your plan doesn't include any sort of ban against guns. You say 80% comes from across the border anyway. But wouldn't it be useful? I mean, why not just ban assault rifles if it takes 20% off of the board? And if I could add to that, violent crime often, you know, is economically driven. So why not include a plan, or do you have do you think you will include a plan to address all the loopholes from money laundering in Canada, which is one of, you know, the violent crime is a symptom of then the money that then goes into the system, and we know that it's had, it's pretty easy to launder money in Canada.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, on the money laundering side, you are absolutely right that this is, there's increasing evidence that this is becoming a very serious issue in Canada. When I announced our housing policy just a few weeks ago, I also indicated that we would be conducting a national inquiry into money laundering as it relates to real estate. And of course, as we get feedback from other levels of law enforcement, we would obviously want to ensure that all different types of money laundering are being looked at so that we can have better tools. On the issue of firearms, it's very important for Canadians to remember that there are already many different types of classifications of firearms that are prohibited and others that are restricted. And the Conservative Party will always support maintaining those that have been deemed prohibited will continue to be prohibited. What we're talking about now is a plan by Justin Trudeau to ask law-abiding firearms owners to follow more laws in response to shootings that, for the overwhelming majority of it, have been related to criminal activity. A drug dealer does not stop to think, do I have the right permit, as he's traveling from one part of the GTA to another to sell illegal drugs. He doesn't worry about whether or not his illegally trafficked firearm, his handgun or his sawed-off shotgun or rifle, is prohibited or restricted or non-restricted. He is a criminal and he is committing crimes, and so asking law-abiding firearms owners to follow more laws is lazy and ineffective government. What this plan does today goes after those repeat and dangerous offenders, and it is on the advice of various police chiefs from all across the country, including Toronto's police chief, who has indicated that precious police resources being diverted to enforce new bans that will just mean law-abiding firearms owners following more laws. Diverting those precious resources is actually going to have a negative impact on keeping our community safe. So we're listening to the experts on this issue. Okay. Alors, les Canadiens peuvent avoir confiance
Canadians
que
can
les
have
armes à feu qui est
confidence
aujourd'hui
in the
prohibée
fact that
va continuer d'être prohibée.
the
Nous avons un
firearms
système
that are
ici au
now
Canada,
prohibited will
robuste,
continue to be.
pour
We have a
les
robust
défenseurs des
system,
armes à feu. Ça va continuer
and
sous le gouvernement
that
conservateur.
system will
Mais la
continue
différence, c'est
under a
que
conservative government.
c'est
But the
simple
difference is
et paresseux
that
et ineffectif de forcer
it is
les
ineffectual to
personnes
force
honnêtes de suivre le plus
honest
des lois.
people
C'est plus
to
difficile de
abide
cibler
by
les
even
vrais
more
criminels, les
laws.
gangs de
It's
rue.
better
Ça, c'est,
to target the real
ça, c'est les
criminals
choses
and
qu'on
gang
va
members,
faire
and that's
sur un
what we
gouvernement
will do
conservateur.
under a conservative
Good
government.
morning, Janice McGregor from CBC News. Mr. Scheer, when was the last time you traveled on your American passport and used it to enter the United States or anywhere else?
I would have to go back and look. I've never renewed my passport as an adult.
So it expired when exactly?
I would have to go back and look.
You don't know?
Like I said, I'd have to go back and look and see when it actually expired. I've never renewed it as an adult. Something my parents obtained for me while I was living at home and a child and teenager.
Okay. And when you turned 18, did you register with the U.S. Selective Service, as would be required for you as a dual Canada-U.S. citizen? They haven't used it since the 80s, but this is the system that's required by law for potential military draft purposes. Even though you were living in Canada, it would have been a legal requirement for you. Did you register?
I would have to check and get back to you on that.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Jasmine Gang from Global Korean Post. So my question is, do you have any plan to ban a handgun on another rifle nationally?
Well, thank you again for the question, because it allows me to reiterate the point that banning additional sorts of firearms has been indicated by chiefs of police from here in Toronto, from Peel, from Winnipeg, from the Canadian Associations of Chiefs of Police, who have all indicated that this would be ineffective, that it would not help address the issue of illegal firearms in our communities. And that is why our plan for safer streets, safer communities is going after the criminals who use firearms. That is a more effective way. So we're going to take the illegal firearms out of the hands of members of gangs and people who have, continually repeatedly commit the same crime over and over. And that is in contrast to Justin Trudeau. Keep in mind that, you know, we're talking about a government that has actually lowered penalties, has actually lowered penalties to the point where people who are convicted of gang activity have been given, can receive just a fine. We don't think that's the right way to go.
Okay. Second question is, could you share your detailed plan for affordable life, including rent control, expansive housing market, and the medical plan for non-insured?
For affordable?
Affordable life.
Yeah, for making life more affordable?
So like the rent control and expansive housing market,
okay.
and medical plan for non-insurers
okay.
who don't have insurance medical.
Right, so the whole theme of our campaign is about making life more affordable. Running a government that lives within its means so that we can leave more money in the pockets of Canadians so that they can get ahead. Right now, with the massive deficits that this Liberal government is racking up, it's meaning more and more of your tax dollar is going to pay the interest on that debt and not going to services. That's why we have to get our finances under control. As we do that, we're going to cut taxes, leave more money in the pockets of Canadians, and make things like housing more affordable. I unveiled a plan just a few weeks ago talking about reworking the stress test, reworking the mortgage amortization period for first-time home buyers, and we're going to have more to say in a little while about how we are going to help address the issue of housing supply as well. So our whole campaign is about making life more affordable. With a Conservative government for the next 4 years, you will get ahead. You'll have more money in your pocket. Life will be more affordable.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
David Aiken, Global News. Good morning. Your campaign has done centered around your chief opponent is not as advertised. And a lot of people may be looking at this revelation of your dual citizenship and saying, you know, this guy's kind of not as advertised. And I think you're right. Millions of Canadians, this is perfectly normal. They have this. But a lot of voters I speak to don't like the hypocrisy that your campaign is now based on, that the other guy's not as advertised and now you're not as advertised. Do you understand how that might be seen as hypocritical?
No, I reject the premise of the question, David. As I said, everyone who knows me and knows my family knows my father was born in the U.S. It's not a secret. In fact, he actually worked at a newspaper and worked with many people in the media and was always open about where he was born and where he was from. And when we're looking at Justin Trudeau, who looked Canadians in the eyes and lied, he was asked specifically about the SNC-Lavalin affair, and he said things that he knew were not true. That is a lie. He promised he would balance the budget in 2019. He didn't. He promised he would make life more affordable. He raised taxes on 80% of Canadians, middle-class Canadians. He said he would represent Canada with strength on the world stage. We saw how that went. So when Canadians are looking at what he is offering this election, they know that they cannot trust him to do the things that he is promising, but they can with a Conservative government.
I know anybody who holds a citizenship of any country, including Canada's, understands the importance, responsibilities that comes with holding that citizenship. You were just asked by Janice about, did you register for the draft? And if you haven't been told, let me tell you, it's a requirement. It's not an option. You have had to register for the draft. There may have been other responsibilities you had as a U.S. citizen, and now you want to renounce. A lot of people may find it hard to understand why you didn't register for the draft and why all of a sudden in August, on the eve of a federal election in which you were trying to be prime minister, you went, maybe I should do something about that American citizenship. You want to square both of those on the draft and why it took so long for you to get rid of this American citizenship?
Well, as I said, I will double back on get back to on that specific question. You can understand growing up in a household, growing up in Canada, that was something that my father did for me after I was born, and I did not renew passports as adults and things like that. I made a decision after becoming leader of the party. This would be something that I would address before the election campaign. It was a personal decision that I made, and so I took those steps before the election.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm so honored to be here. Can you just give it up once more?